Member Cantwell.
Thank you. Mr. Bedford, we had a conversation in my office about SMS in general. And do you believe that the FAA should have a real SMS system for themselves?
Well, thank you for the question, Ranking Member Cantwell. Thank you for the time in your office and the substantive conversation that we had. And thank you sincerely for showing leadership last year coming out to visit us at the Lift Academy. So thank you for all of that. I will tell you that SMS is truly the lifeblood, and I'm sure you know that it was in the Aviation Safety Act that we mandated SMS for all commercial Part 121 carriers. So that became the standard, which I think moved the needle on aviation safety in a significant way.
Well, it has to be implemented, and you have a general counsel who definitely shortchanged it in the first Trump administration, and I have a fear he's going to shortchange it in this one. So my point is, you and I talked about there's two different SMS systems within the FAA. Given the accidents that have happened with both the MAX and this, I think it proves that both of those systems aren't really working. Is it just your viewpoint? Is that your viewpoint, that there's something wrong with the SMS that the FAA is using today? If we've had these two horrific accidents, or actually three, if you include both MAX accidents.
So I think we are all aligned on this. Something's amiss.
Okay.
I think we believe that the SMS system at the FAA needs a radical overhaul. I think we can do it. Our arch enemy here is complacency. You know, not having SMS in a binder on a shelf somewhere, but actively, daily utilizing SMS and safety risk management assessments as we're looking at change. Change itself is not bad. We shouldn't resist change and hide behind a shield of...
So you'll help enforce I have so many safety questions.
No, go ahead, sorry.
So you'll help enforce manufacturers to use SMS. You'll help get a better SMS system at the FAA.
As we discussed, it's a key tool to actually doing the job right the first time.
Okay, 1,500-hour rule. There's a lot of concerns because you worked for a company, you were part of a lobbying effort, you came here and tried to change this rule. What are you going to do in your term, a full 5-year term as my colleague is suggesting, that I'm all for consistency at the FAA. We got a big job here. What are you saying that you will do to recuse yourself from a 1,500-hour rule that you, as administrator, could initiate? So during your term, will you initiate such rule?
Thank you for the question, Senator Cantwell. I'm sure I'm going to get that question multiple times today, and I'm looking forward to actually clarifying the record on that. But I can tell you the President's vision right now and what we've discussed is the urgent need to modernize the air traffic control system, fix the FAA staffing shortages, and redesign the NAS for emerging technologies and innovation. So that will be my uncompromising focus.
I get that, and I appreciate that. But people are going to want to know, families who've lost loved ones because of the safety implementations that have taken place, they want to know whether you're going to lead any effort to change that rule while you're administrator. So you can think about it some more for the record. You can give us a firm written answer, but I think a lot will be depending on that answer.
I appreciate that.
Because people, you helped fund and lobbied for a change for it.
Well,
so,
if we have time, I can respond to that now.
Yes, but could I ask you something else first, and then we can
go
go
ahead.
Back to that?
Of course.
A very important issue we also discussed in my office is this C-band, high C-band sale that my colleague and others are proposing as part of this bill. And last time we ran into a lot of interference on that. So we have joint studies that say this is a safety issue. What is your view?
Well, my view is I'm not informed enough to formulate an opinion. I can tell you from a past experience, we felt very rushed in terms of spectrum sales and rolling out the technology. So I hope we've learned some lessons from the past and will be much more collaborative and coordinated before we simply execute a plan. We need to ensure that the aircraft are operated safely within our nation's airspace systems, especially Class B airspace at congested airports.
Well, what's going to happen if this goes into effect?
Well, honestly, again, I don't know where the spectrum bands are, so I can't speak, competently about the issue. I can tell you
we had a
we're
very
concerned.
different conversation in my office, and you told me that the last interference was a big problem, and you told me that this would be a big problem.
So
I need consistency because it follows the 1,500-hour thing. You can say now, I'm not going to do 1,500 hours, but if you get in there and then you get pressured and you do 1,500-hour changes, it's a different story. And on this, in my office, you clearly said there were interference issues, it was a mess, and you definitely didn't want to have future altimeter problems. We can't have sale of spectrum and then have altimeter interruptions or problems. We need to work cohesively on test bedding these issues.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, so do you have concerns that this is premature to move this without that test bedding?
The record is clear. We had significant challenges with the last spectrum rollout. We had interference with radio altimeters. We needed to invest in our aircraft with filters to make sure that they could operate safely. I said, for the record, that we should learn those lessons of the past and act more collaboratively rolling out. So I am advocating
We're not acting collaboratively right now, I can tell you that. Okay, so I see my time has expired. I do want to clarify, you are for us closing the ADSB loopholes, right? And moving forward on ADBS in and out. As part of Next Gen, the whole system, you're for moving forward.
I am supportive of ADSB-in and ADSB-in-like technologies that put more control in the cockpit, alerting our pilots of traffic that's impending in their areas, yes. And that would be including requiring our military operators in airspace to also operate visibly.
And ADBS out too, just in the transmission, making sure they do both.
And TCAS, and making sure that our warfighters' equipment's also properly maintained and working on both TCAS and ADSB.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would note, Mr. Bedford, that Senator Cantwell asked a series of questions about spectrum auction, and Senator Cantwell has previously stated that this committee's spectrum pipeline language would require the FCC to auction at least 100 megahertz in the upper C band, which is 3.98 to 4.2 gigahertz. That's true. What's not true is the claim that this poses a risk to aviation safety. First, the language provides 2 years for an auction to occur. Ample time, especially since the FCC has already begun work on this band. And secondly, the bill requires auctioning less than half of the spectrum in the band, giving the FCC and industry significant flexibility to avoid any adverse impact on aviation. The lower C band, 3.7 to 3.98 gigahertz, which was auctioned a few years ago for 5G use, did prompt concerns about interference with radio altimeters. But despite this, there was no widespread disruptions or accidents. Mitigation efforts worked. That episode forced the FAA, the FCC, NTIA, and DoD, and industry to collaborate closely, and it worked. That coordination set a model for future spectrum decisions that is incorporated into this committee's bill. Transparency, urgency, mutual respect, and problem solving. Spectrum policy is not putting aviation safety at risk. On the contrary, the broader bill's FAA modernization funding will enhance it. Senator Fisher.
Can I just say, Mr. Chairman, that you brought up serving 5 years, and it was shortly after this debacle that Mr. Dixon decided, I've had enough. And I think the fact that he tried to negotiate in the first time this came through, and people couldn't negotiate, and people didn't negotiate. And the telcos just ran over the aviation sector, and the White House tried to mitigate it, and Steve Dixon more or less threw up his hands. So we got to get this right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.